All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're tackling something absolutely massive, maybe one of the most ambitious financial projects on the entire planet. I'm talking about the European Union's huge effort to completely rewire its financial system, all for a sustainable future. Yeah, it's a big story, one that's all about data, a whole new set of rules, and literally trillions of euros.
So that really is the multi-trillion euro question, isn't it? The money is definitely out there. But how do you get it to flow to projects that are actually green and not just pretending to be? For years, the whole market has been wrestling with this problem of greenwashing. That's where a company's sustainability claims are, well, they're kind of vague or inconsistent or sometimes just flat out misleading. And without clear, trustworthy information, it's almost impossible for an investor to tell the difference between what's really sustainable and what just looks green on the surface.
And we're talking about a massive, massive challenge here. Think about it. The entire financial system, for centuries, was built to do one thing really well: measure profit and risk. That's it. It wasn't designed to measure environmental impact. So to make this huge pivot towards sustainability, the whole system needs a brand new kind of fuel. It needs reliable, comparable data that clearly says this is sustainable and this is not. Without that, all that capital just can't be pointed in the right direction.
And trust me, the stakes could not be higher. This quote right here from the IPCC, it just perfectly captures the urgency that's driving this whole regulatory firestorm. This isn't some nice-to-have policy initiative. For the EU, this is a direct response to what they see as an existential threat. It's a call for immediate, deep, and profound action across every single part of the economy.
So what's the big idea? The solution? Well, the EU is building something pretty revolutionary. Think of it as a new data pipeline for the entire financial world. It's designed to do three things: generate, transport, and then use reliable sustainability data. It's just like any pipeline, right? First, you got to create the raw material, in this case, the data. Then you need a system to move it from A to B. And finally, and this is the crucial part, you have to make sure it actually gets used at the other end to make real decisions. So let's break down exactly how this whole thing works.
Okay, so first things first. Before you can even begin to report on something green or invest in something green, everybody, and I mean everybody, has to agree on what the word green even means. So that's exactly where the EU started, by creating a common language, a dictionary, if you will.
And that dictionary has a name: the EU Taxonomy. Now, this isn't just some helpful guide. It is a legally binding classification system. For the very first time, we have a detailed, science-based rulebook that defines which business activities can officially be called sustainable. This is the bedrock, the absolute foundation of the whole system, and its main job is to bring clarity and stop that greenwashing problem right at the source.
So how does a business activity actually get this sustainable label? Well, it's got to pass a two-part test. First, it has to make a real substantial contribution to at least one of these 6 environmental goals you see here. And second, and this part is absolutely crucial, it can't do any significant harm to any of the other 5. It's a really smart framework because it forces a holistic view. It stops a company from, say, building a shiny new solar farm while at the same time dumping waste into a local river.
Okay, so we've got our dictionary. We have a common language. Now, how do you actually use it to start generating that raw data we talked about? Well, with the language sorted, the EU went straight to the source of all this information: the companies themselves.
And this is where we see a huge leap forward. The new rule is called the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, or CSRD for short, and it is a massive upgrade from the old way of doing things. We're going from just a few thousand companies having to report to something like 50,000. And it's not just about the number of companies. The kind of data they have to report is way more detailed, it's standardized, and it's all linked directly back to that EU taxonomy dictionary. This right here, this is the start of our data pipeline. It's what creates that huge, consistent flow of data straight from the source.
All right, so now we have this massive river of data being created. The pipeline is flowing. The next critical step is to make sure the financial sector, the people with the money, actually use it. Because, it's one thing to have a ton of data. It's a whole other thing to make sure it actually drives investment decisions.
And that's where another piece of the puzzle, the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation, or SFDR, comes in. This rule basically forces asset managers, pension funds, you name it, to open up their books and be transparent. They have to explain how they're thinking about sustainability risks and what kind of negative impacts their investments might be having. And most importantly, they have to classify their investment funds. The simplest way to think about it is light green and dark green.
Article 8 funds are light green. They promote sustainability. Article 9 funds are dark green. Sustainability is their core objective. And the key part? They can't just say it. They have to use that brand new data from the CSRD to prove it.
And this is where the whole thing gets really cool. Because this very complex system, it actually connects all the way back to you, to individual investors and the choices you make. This data pipeline doesn't just end with the big banks and fund managers.
See, thanks to some key updates to investor protection rules, your financial advisor is now required to ask you about your sustainability preferences. They have to ask you things like, hey, do you want to invest in companies that are aligned with the EU's Green Dictionary? Or do you want to make sure you avoid investments that have a negative impact on the planet? It literally makes sustainability a mandatory part of the conversation, and that empowers you to put your money where your values are, using the exact same data that started its journey way back at the beginning of our pipeline.
Now, this brings us to something that often confuses people when they talk about sustainable investing: bonds. It's actually pretty simple when you break it down. There are two main flavors. You've got your traditional green bonds. With these, it's all about where the money goes, the use of proceeds. The cash you invest is specifically earmarked for a green project, like building a wind farm. Simple. Then you have sustainability-linked bonds. These are different. They're about the company's overall performance. The money can be used for anything, but, and here's the catch, the interest rate you get is tied to whether that company hits its own big-picture sustainability goals. Both are super useful tools, but they get you there in very different ways.
Okay, so let's just zoom out for a second and appreciate the sheer ambition of this whole project. Because what we're talking about here is so much more than just a few new disclosure rules. This is a fundamental overhaul of the entire system.
That data pipeline we've been talking about, it's really just one piece of a much, much bigger puzzle. The EU is embedding these ideas into the absolute core plumbing of the financial system. I mean, they're changing the safety rules for banks to include climate risks in their stress tests. The European Central Bank itself is tweaking its policies. And there are even new rules on the way that will make big companies responsible for what happens way down in their supply chains, both for the environment and for human rights. It is, without a doubt, a total system-wide rewiring.
And why are they doing all this? Well, look at this number. The scale of the investment gap they're trying to fill is just staggering. 350 billion euros. That's how much extra investment is needed every single year just for the EU to hit its 2030 climate and energy targets. Government money alone can't even come close to filling that gap. The whole point of this entire regulatory revolution is to unlock and mobilize private money on a scale we have never seen before.
So, when you put it all together, the EU has built what is, by far, the most comprehensive sustainable finance framework anywhere in the world. The architecture is there. The pipes are laid to channel all this capital toward a green transition. But the big question remains, will this incredibly ambitious master plan actually work? Will it unlock a sustainable future? Or will all this complexity just create a bureaucratic nightmare that ends up stifling the very innovation it's meant to encourage? Honestly, the answer to that question is going to shape the future of finance and, well, our planet for many, many years to come.